Isolated is a project I created right when the pandemic hit. And it was my way of giving something to do, a way to sort through my own emotions of this really surreal experience that's going on right now. Everything from the actual literal feeling of isolation to just getting the news that we're getting from the outside world, which is at times dubious. And it was my way of kind of sorting through all of that. So the first track of it, it's called Lockdown. It's from the first EP called Week 1, and there's a subsequent EP released every week during the duration of this for basically as long as it goes. And this is the very beginning of all of it. So this is Lockdown, and this is how it was made. So this piece, it started on piano, and I recorded the piano that lives out in my hall out there, which is a Yamaha U3 upright. And it started off as this really, really basic motif. It's just a C and a D flat, just alternating. And it sounds like this. That's the whole thing. But the layers, they all get added underneath it and they kind of recontextualize it. So right in the beginning, we add another piano layer. And the reason why that they're done differently is because, yes, I mean, you can easily play both of these things all with two hands at once, but I wanted more control in the mix. So I wanted to be able to, bring the right hand down or bring the left hand up, what have you. And so I played each little part separately because it gave me more freedom in the mix later. So it's just really simple and slow. There's that D flat again. I think it's prettier here. And then we basically resolve on the F. That's going to go back to the C. But as it evolves, what we actually see happening is first chord's a C major, not a C minor. So that gives it that kind of like Spanish Phrygian sound, which is just a sound I've always really, really adored. So that's going to be basically like the melodic hook for this entire piece. And it's all based around these pianos. Then eventually we get another piano that's layered on top, and it's just a top melody. It sounds like this. And again, just right hand, simple. And that's that's the context. As far as what's going on the pianos, these are recorded at home. This is not a sample library. You can hear it. I mean, you can hear the pedal clicking as I release the sustain pedal, and that's kind of the charm of it. What's going on processing-wise, though, and it's basically the same plug-in chain depending on whatever piano channel we're on. At least this one, because this one is not providing any low end, so I high passed that. So everything under 237 here is getting cut. There is a boost on the high end because I close mic'd it really closely. So there's felt down, like the damper pedal's on, and then the mics are about just an inch off the felt. So every time you play, you get this really wide stereo field, and the piano becomes percussive, which is something I just really enjoy. So that's why there's also this high end boost to bring that up. And if we go to these other ones, like say the chords, you'll see the EQ is a little bit different. So we're allowing a lot more of the low end and we're not adding that high end because the other piano is kind of taking care of that high end. After that, it goes into well, first we go to this guy and we're using the Slate 550, the API 550 EQ. And again, I'm boosting the high end pretty dramatically, 6 dB at 10K. And then I'm taking out a bit of the low mids here and boosting the low end, at least on this, on the chords. I wouldn't be doing that on the high one. Yeah, on the high one, there is no boost in the low end. And then it goes through a compressor, and it's the Empirical Labs Arouser. I love this compressor forever. Ever since it came out, it's been one of my favorites. And it should be, it's not too heavy, but as you can see, if you look at the waveform itself, the piano hits are pretty uniform. And I did play it softly, so there is that. And then lastly, there's a multi-band compressor. And this is just taking out some low mid mud, which is kind of inevitable with a close mic'd piano, and especially when they're all layered up. So it's just doing that, really simple. And this piano, you'll see this throughout the entire track. I mean, it's also how the piece ends, it's using the same exact chord progression. So now let's go further down. So now we got these hammer acoustics, and these are pretty fun. They fade in. I'm just going to skip ahead. So what those are, that's an acoustic guitar being played with forks. So it's an open tuning where it's tuned to like an open C, basically. And I took basically these forks. There was a second one, I don't know where it went, but just played the open strings like they were drums. And you get this kind of like hammered dulcimer sound, but it's not a dulcimer, it's just an acoustic guitar. But it adds a really nice layer. And then underneath it, we have this. And that's also then taking a cello bow to that same acoustic guitar and just open strings and just bowing it. Simple as that. And it goes through an eventide black hole reverb, which gives it, you know, that massive amount of space. And it's very wet. It's at 69%. But that's that sound. I love that sound. And then we get to kind of something, this is a newer instrument for me. And it kind of becomes a lead, and it is this. And that's an erhu, and it's actually like, it's literally right here in a bucket. It sounds like a dying cat. It really, like, I'm absolutely terrible with it, and I have no training at this at all. But for kind of having that kind of sound, it's really an incredible instrument that sounds really unique. So it's really hard to, I mean, even if I tried to do it now, I'm sure it would be. It's a really hard. Yeah, it's honestly really difficult not to make it sound like it's a dying cat. But it does offer a pretty cool new thing. And if you look closely, you'll see there's this little sticker right here. It says AT81. That's because I auto-tuned my erhu performance because it was not in tune at all. So, but that provides kind of this melodic hook that we'll hear throughout the piece. It's all the erhu, and it gets used over here as well. Especially, like, let's bring it in with the acoustic guitars and then the pianos, because it is all quite pretty. So, really nice texture. And then there's some cellos underneath it. And these are played also. And it's just providing the bass motion. And once again, you can see that I auto-tuned my cello playing because, again, I'm not a trained cellist by any means. These are tools for me to be inspired by and try to create the best I can with them. But it is, again, you know, part of the fun for me is the experimentation and not being trained at this at all. So anyway, the cellos are basically providing the same kind of the motion. This is the first chord. It's also a C major. 2 takes. Pan slightly left and slightly right. And those get layered underneath all of it. And then underneath all of this, we have these kind of ambient pads going on. And the whole piece opens up with this one. And that was made on the modular. It's basically sine waves going into the Earthquaker Devices Afterneath Eurorack module, which is just this big spacey reverb. And just, it's totally wet, so everything's just mushing together. It was a sequence of maybe five notes, something like that. I mean, it really doesn't matter because I created it just to have a blur. So this is this blur. It sits underneath the whole thing. And then there's a second blur underneath it, which is this. And this is also stuff done with delay pedals. I think that was probably modular too, but then this went through, I think, both an Earthquaker afterneath, or not the afterneath, an Avalanche run pedal, as well as an Eventide Space, as well as I think also an Earthquaker C machine. So it's really like whatever the original source was, because it's completely blurred at this point, but they need to be drones. They're supposed to be pads. And together they function like this. Just like this really nice lush ambient pad that just like hangs over everything. And later, we just get a big swell. And it's the same kind of thing, probably pitched up an octave, and then super wet. Again, going through a black hole. These other ones, mostly EQ work and some multiband compression. This one has a bit more going on. If we pull it up, let's disable everything. Add the EQ. And there must have been a really resonant point right there, so that's why we have that big notch. Then there's a doubler going on, and this is just to spread it super wide. I want it to be really chorused since the other one isn't as wide. So this kind of takes the sides, the other's a little bit more centered. And then we wash it out super hard. And then this, I'm using this Brainworks Master Desk purely just for the stereo function, and I'm just bringing out the sides even further. I want this to be really wide. And then lastly, there's just some minor corrective EQ work. Simple. And that is basically the whole intro section of this piece. There is a little bit of percussion, which is this wine glass perk, which I was drinking wine when I was recording this, and I just started tapping on the wine glass just with my fingernails. And I don't think it was a drumstick. I think it was literally just tick, 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 tick. And yeah, I cut it up and I quantized it to be a little pattern. It's got a delay on it, which is really giving it a lot of the pulse, but this is the pattern without anything. We get an EQ. More of this, the 550 EQ. Valhalla delay, which is now giving us like the dotted eighth ping pong. And then lastly, a B2 by 2C audio reverb. Just spreading it out a little bit. Simple as that. And so basically, this climaxes up to here, and this is where it starts to get very intense. You can see there's going to be a lot of fun right here. All right, so let's talk about what's going on there. Basically, this section, it's entirely percussion for this intro, or at least the intro of the groove section. So first, we've got a kick, and this is the simplest thing of the whole drum track. We have one kick right here, and then this kick is literally that same kick right here, just pitched down an octave. And that's why you can see it's also twice as long. It's literally the same thing. But we're all these pedal drums. So basically what's going on there, I created a drum loop out of an acoustic drum sounding library. And then I took that loop and I ran it through a litany of guitar pedals and just recorded the results in. So that's why we have all these different channels called pedal drums 1, then pedal drums dupe, etc. Because if I I think if I pull this out, yeah, this is what this one sounded like. That's a delay of some kind. Now, this one is a different one, different take. Oops. I'm pretty sure that was an eventide rose. Then we have the really distorted ones, and this is where they get kind of really fun and gnarly. Here's one of them. Now, as far as what pedals those went through, I couldn't tell you at this point, because there were a lot of different versions of this stuff. Nope, come back here. Is this the same? This might be the same take. Just put on different channels. Yes, that is. So that's like that, so I could have the snare on a different channel, just make it easier to mix. Probably the same thing with this hat. Yep, that is that hat. Okay. And then let's go further down. What is this? You know, I think this is the same one as well, just with different EQ settings. It looks like it. Okay, so this is our distorted sound, but what's going on here is they're on different channels, so they could all have different EQ settings. So this one's really bandpass, but allowing basically the low mids to come through. Then we have a different one, this guy, and his EQ setting is letting more mid-mids come through. So together, they do this kind of thing. That's what the other puts. And then there's one more down here. And what's going, this guy, this was another pedal thingy. And what that was, that's definitely going through a flanger or a phaser within the Eventide H9. And again, it's all like running the stuff through a lot of different outboard gear and then just cutting up the result. And that's when you get these really interesting, like intricate, clicky drum things. Same thing even with this fill. For instance, this. That, if memory serves me correctly, if I reverse it, this was part of a drum. Yep, that was basically a kick drum tuned really low through a ton of fuzz. And you know, I made it work by taming it with some EQ. And also there is, I have some basically stereo field automation going on. So if we look at this guy, it starts totally mono. And I think it actually, that's why. I see. It's actually just copied from the other channel. But if we go here, this should be, you know, once upon a time. I think these are in the wrong places, actually. And that's just an error that never, I guess, got fixed. Because I can see, you'd think this should be right there, right? Or not. I truthfully don't know what's going on there. That's okay. Or maybe I just moved it and it didn't, I moved the track and the automation didn't follow, because maybe it was supposed to be like this. That would make more sense, because what that would be doing is it starts mono, and by the time you get to the end, it gets really wide. I think that was totally supposed to be the intention, and for whatever reason, I did it wrong. That happens. I never would have known that until now. Wow, I feel dumb. But that stuff happens. I never even noticed until now. So anyway, lots of cut up beats. And then I have these little bits of field recording stuck in the middle. That's literally dry ice sitting on my washing machine. Simple as that. And I time corrected it so it fits in the groove, but it's just a really cool sound. So that's what that is. There are other little bits like a guitar hammer, a hit of a hammer. And it's just creating these little moments whenever you get this drop, and then you get a little like interstitial hit. Same thing even with like this little pad. First we have this, dry ice once again, and then this, which again should have probably been something like this. Oops. That's way cooler. And then we have this little bit of the pad from the sine waves, just pitched down an octave. So they all get layered together. And they just all cut right back out again. And that keeps going until we get to the Reese. And then we get to the chord progression back, bass comes in. Good old Reese bass. We've talked about this stuff before, so I will skip that. What's going on though? It is just anything that's under 53, I'm converting to mono. Simple as that. And then on top of it, it's getting sidechained off the kick using the Gecko Drum's smash and grab compressor. And then there's a second bass underneath it, Reese Destroyer. And this is that same thing getting fed through fuzz pedals. So without any of the EQ or filtering. It's pretty filthy. Then we filter it down with Filter Freak. A little bit of EQ after. Just take out the low end because we got the sub underneath it. And by the very end, the Reese Destroyer, that gets brought up. So we get this really big crescendo at the end. And the cellos are back. The sines are back. And right around this time also, we introduced this big Juno 106 pad. It fades in, so let's go from here. And this is once again just to fatten everything. Like, it's super wide, it's double tracked, pan hard left and right. It's going through a Moog filter, the UAD Moog. Adds a lot. Then again, EQ work, I'm really adding a lot of high end, and then I'm cutting out low mids and low ends. And lastly, it's getting sidechained once again. It's really big sounding, and that's what I really like about it. And then there's one other bit that's this other main layer. So halfway through of this end section, we get these quarter note strum guitars. They fade in, of course. Or I have to unmute them, run solo. And it's just the pulse, simple as that. And then we get one more layer, which is basically, it's electric guitar, and it is the same melody, give or take, or it's a very similar melody as that top piano. So this melody, but now basically transposed onto guitar, and it's with a fair amount of distortion. So this fades in towards the end, and it sounds like this. And again, mild EQ, delay, just a dual delay, just a quarter note here, a dotted quarter here, just really spread it out wide. Then it's going again through the black hole, and this is to make it spacey and wide. And then lastly, just some mild corrective EQ. So that layered all together, you get this gigantic end section. And the last thing I'll talk about is, so we took those erhu melodies from earlier, and now to make them poke through, because it was a pretty thin sounding instrument, it's going through a ton of distortion. So here they are now. You can hear a lot of high-end fuzz right there. Good old isotope trash. Here's the last phrase. Here's without the distortion. And that really helps it cut through, because let's go back and let's just play this without distortion. It kind of disappears a bit. So the distortion really gives it some edge, and it makes this instrument really cut through. Remember, it's mono. It really is mono, minus the reverb behind it. So while a lot of other stuff is really spread out to the sides, the erhu's mono, and that also gives it a little bit of room. And the way this piece ends is just with those original pads. The signs. It ends on a C major. Simple as that. Their effects, it's nothing out of the ordinary. It's dry ice again, but heavily granulized, as well as granular cymbals. And then a bowed hi-hat that I recorded in the room next door. Point of this, take cello bows to everything. They're a lot of fun. And then, yeah, all cut up drums. So as you can see, I mean, you can visually see all the little cuts, and that's how that drum beat is made. And it's a cool sound, and I can't believe I messed up that, that bit of automation, because that's the part that's out there in the wild right now, and I totally messed that up. So maybe I should have recorded this before I even put the tracks out. Too late at this point. So that's locked down, and stay tuned for the rest of the tracks that are soon to come. I will do a breakdown of this stuff every week as they come out. So until the next time, see you then.